You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY and Political Voices Network. Outside the Box is brought to you by Roush Plumbing and Remodeling, the plumbing and remodeling company the Fox Valley depends on. Shout out to Phil, who says, late for work on 420. Let's get something straight. I was not late for work. I was here in the 6 o'clock hour. I know Phil on a personal level, and he's just jerking me around. And I know that. I know that. I can take a joke. That's fine. Larry out in North Carolina saying, what was it here? You sound like you overslept. Don't answer that. No, none of that happened, friends. I actually was doing a guest spot on the Stephanie Miller show on Political Voices Network from 8:30 until 8:45, and Zach Morris, our producer extraordinaire here at Woodward, along with Landon Moore, was willing to pinch hit for me to allow me to be able to go and do that media hit in one of our back studios. You can check out the conversation on the Political Voices YouTube page, as well as check out the video of my show with a couple of bells and whistles there as well. It was funny, though. I didn't know how it was going to end up progressing because like 4 sentences into the conversation, we branched off into, this two sides of the same coin conversation isn't that accurate, is it? I was like, well, it depends on the topic of the day, depending on what we're talking about. I can argue that one side definitely is more palatable than the other one, but as far as either side being good, I kind of struggle with that concept a little bit there. But I was absolutely flattered that they invited me on. We had a very good conversation, bouncing around to a couple of the biggest stories from over the weekend here. Not necessarily comparable to what we're going to be getting into here today with all of you guys. And of course, I welcome any texts here, 920-281-1150. The YouTube and TikTok and Facebook stream lives are all up. Shout out to Jarmani, who was watching, as well as Anna, who were watching on Political Voices Network, said the show or the segment was very good. I appreciate that. I didn't choke it away. That's what I was worried about. I thought that might happen, but we got there. We got where we needed to go. We got a lot to jump into here today. And no, unfortunately, for those of you that were expecting a marijuana-based show on 420, that's not what you're going to be getting from me today. Although today and every day would be a great day to remind you guys that we should probably be legalizing it right about now. But we're not going to be making any special occasions out here just for 420. But you have to laugh at that. But so let's jump into, in my opinion, what should be the largest story of the day. Of course, it won't be, because I never have a finger on the pulse for these kind of things. But to me, this is, if you were trying to build a political party to gain momentum, to get people on your side, to highlight the shortcomings in our economy right now and what you were going to do to push back against it, this would be the story that I would think that people would want to use. We're going to start with Walmart because they're the more egregious of the kind of companies that engage in this behavior, but we will be branching out to a number of different companies here. But starting with Walmart, by the end of 2026, they themselves are reporting that they are going to be using digital price tags across the nation at as many stores as physically possible. What the digital price tags will allow for them to do, according to them, is expedite the process of changing prices instead of having workers go from product to product, raising prices and lowering prices, LOL at that second one, as they see fit. This will allow for them to reportedly be able to change the prices and keep them more uniform across the entire nation. For those of you that are newer to the show, this is lending into what's referred to as price surveillance. Price surveillance is when companies realize, through buying our data, through things that you search, whatever the situation may be, through buying habits, using your debit card data, it's all correlated. They determine when things are going to sell more, how much people are willing to pay. And there's a chance, if you walk past a product in a Walmart and see a price and decide you're not going to buy it, by the time you are done shopping, you could circle back around to that same product and see that it's been reduced by 40 cents or a dollar or $1.50 or even more, depending on what the situation is. I am not against the idea of expediting certain processes for businesses, and I am not a fool that that is the name of the game. But without some kind of legislation pushing back against that kind of movement, against the capacity to coordinate prices based on data and what time of day it is, and when you notice certain products get sold and when they don't. Like, for instance, if you have a bakery at your grocery store, it stands to reason that a lot of those goods are going to go when they are fresh. Now, they'll sit all day and will sell all day, but there is a better chance that they will be sold in the morning. So what do? You charge more in the morning because you know people will be willing to pay more because they want the stuff fresh out of the oven, and slowly reduce the price from there. I don't think I need to describe in an era when our bills continue going up. There's a viral video out there right now of somebody shopping at Panera that bought 5 items, and the 5 items went for $71. I don't think I need to describe to people that we are in the middle of a cost of living crisis right now, and the idea that price surveillance is just going to be another way that we are able to get fleeced is not going to be an acceptable answer for most Americans. Maybe for MAGA Republicans, if Donald Trump tells them that it's the best thing for them. But I'd argue for most other people, they do not want to be a part of this system. And as Cynthia says, and she can kind of read my mind where I'm going, she says, I understand that airlines are doing this too. So I'm going to have to get another job, start shopping at, or card, and start shopping at Dollar Tree so that they can't screw me around. And to Cynthia's point, random person on social media goes and says, I love flying JetBlue, but a $230 increase on a ticket after one day is crazy. I'm just trying to make it to a funeral. Now, I know there's some boomers in the audience right now is like, in my day, we just didn't go to the funerals. But like for the rest of us that actually love our family and would like to go to these kind of things, that's an obscene jump to just go to a random part of America on a random day in order to be with your families after the passing of a loved one. And if you may be sitting here wondering, how is it that a $230 increase might happen in one day? Well, fret not, we have the answer. JetBlue themselves took it upon themselves to offer some advice on how to find a cheaper ticket. They responded to that person's post by saying, try clearing your cache and cookies or booking with an incognito window. We're sorry for your loss. So what this says to me is the software application, the JetBlue app, the JetBlue website was able to read that this individual was shopping prices, that they checked one day, then they gave it 24 hours, and they checked back again. And their software used that information to charge them an extra $230 for a plane ticket that otherwise had not changed. And the only reason the price went up is because the app knew that he needed to get to that location by a certain period of time. And it went up $230. They straight up said, they did not say they were doing it, but why would clearing your cookies reduce the price? Why would shopping on an incognito window instead of your normal Google account or Bing account, if you're one of the 7 people that has a Bing account, why would doing that lower the price, other than they were following this person trying to determine how to milk the most money out of them possible? This is one of those stories that isn't on everybody's mind yet because it's not pervasive. As soon as it starts to become the norm, it will become more regular. Much like how the idea of oligarchs and corporate wealth 10 years ago really wasn't on people's minds. And today, a larger and larger percentage of people are waking up to the fact that, oh, you know, it really doesn't matter how much we cut these people's taxes. They just continue laying people off and not really increasing our wages in any kind of way. It takes time for it to catch up until it impacts a large enough percentage of people, but it doesn't mean that it wasn't relevant 10 years ago. It's the same idea with surveillance pricing now. This is a niche topic. Some of you are like, Ben, you're blowing this out of proportion. This is just a digifying of an otherwise analog industry, and I'm here to tell you right now that's how it is being spun, but that is absolutely not how this is going to end up playing out for most of you that can hear the sound of my voice right now. Whether it be the cost of some generic baked good at a Walmart, or a flight to be at a wedding or a funeral, or whatever the situation may be, the companies are finding that they have the ability to now market to us in ways that specifically speak to us. I was joking with a friend of mine. I really don't buy video games as often as I used to anymore. And what's funny is the systems can tell when you look at a game, and if you don't buy it, it's like, hey, it just so happens that this game went 20% off yesterday. How about now? Would you like to buy it now? And if you went to another person's house, it would still be full price because they weren't showing any interest in it. We already live in a world of political bubbles. We already live in a world of find your own news, make your own reality. This is not going to help matters when all of a sudden we're all seeing different prices for things based on what our own interests are and what we're willing to pay for things. That is not an economy that I want to be a part of, and I think it's worth highlighting that if we do not stand up and highlight that we are frustrated by this now, much like we are with data centers, and we're seeing the success with data centers, if we do not step up and express our frustration now, this will become ubiquitous and much more difficult to unravel once it really starts to take effect in a couple of years here. Walmart is already saying by the end of this year, they will be able to have most of their stores digitized. JetBlue is already acting this way right now. This conversation took place on April 18th of this year. This is happening without a concerted effort from political officials. They're going to get away with this, and it's going to make life even more expensive than it already is. Then you're going to be making the decisions between which groceries you can't afford this week, between which funeral for which grandparent or parent or sibling or whatever the situation may be that you're going to blow off because you're not going to pay $800 to fly 5 states over. There comes a time when standing up for what is right needs to be part of the political process. And I'm here to tell you right now, as someone who just got off a show where they said, Ben, you don't actually believe that both political parties sucked, do you? Well, show me a political party that's willing to stand up to this one, and I'll show you a political party that means business. Unfortunately, I don't know that either party intends to do anything about this, and I think that is worth highlighting. I think Republican Party will make it easier for companies to do this. I don't think that they have any intention of stemming it. But I don't think that the Democratic Party has any intention to make life more affordable for us. And that should be a major talking point of politicians, assuming the democracy's at stake standard is going to be the standard in 2025 or in 2028. I'd like to see somebody step forward with a better idea. And with that, we got our first caller of the day. Let's see who we got here. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Morning, Ben. Jerry from Appleton.
Hey, Jerry. What's up, man?
So really good topic that you're raising. I can see where this is going. They're going to go to dynamic pricing. I'll give you a hypothetical and then a real example. The hypothetical is, there's flooding near your local Walmart. We're going to double the price of all the supplies that people are going to need in order to deal with a flood. So that's what's going to happen if they're able to implement this dynamic pricing tool.
Absolutely.
Without any legislation. So let me give you my real example. One of my best friends is a huge fan of the rock band Rush. So I think it was last year they announced a tour. So I called him up. I said, Steve, Rush is coming to Chicago. If you want to go, I'll go with you. So we're online, both sitting in front of our computers when the tickets go on sale. but they have one of these electronic lottery systems because demand is so high. And I think the cheap seats were 125, which was the most we were willing to spend. By the time one of us was able to get in, it had gone up from 125 to 250. And I said, well, Steve, you must be doing something wrong. I finally got in, and then it was up to 350. And that was in the span of a couple of hours.
Wow.
And that's what they're going to do. That's what they're going to do if they're allowed to implement a system like this without any controls. It'll be price gouging based on supply and demand. And they'll say, oh, our algorithm was, we didn't look at specific situations. But what will happen is if there's an emergency, for example, the prices of whatever supplies you need, including food, could go through the roof.
Yeah, and that's the kicker, Jerry, is, and I know you're kind of funneled into the same camp here. If it's the cost of a ticket price, well, shoot, I guess we're just not going then because they decided to gouge. It's not the end of the world. It's a nice to have, but it's, it's not the end of the world. It's when you're talking about during an emergency at a grocery store, at a fuel pump, at a fill in the blank here, that's when it starts to become questionable. It's kind of like how when they don't let you take a drink into the airport, and then if you want to buy a bottle of water at the airport, it's $6. like they kind of have you.
Yeah,
and go ahead.
Sorry, and it doesn't even have to be an emergency. So there's certain groceries that my wife and I like, and sometimes they're in short supply, probably because there's not enough capacity at the manufacturer. Baked Lays, for example. This store is out of baked Lays, so I'll go to Walmart. Oh, the price is doubled because they know that demand is up.
Exactly, and that's all it takes. And as we get more digitized, knowing that moment is happening is only going to be easier for some of these corporations here. I don't like the trajectory it's on, that's for sure. And I appreciate the call, Jerry. Great insight as per usual. Oh, he got me with the quick hang up there. All right. So, but yeah, he's exactly right with what's going on there. And I have to agree with his assessment on matters and something that we need to be cognizant of. These are the kind of topics that need to be brought to the forefront. This is what needs to be discussed. If only the CEO of Walmart were doing dynamic pricing and also dressing in drag, then maybe we could get the MAGA movement on board with just how bad of an idea this is. But until then, unfortunately, we're going to have to try and raise some awareness on this the old-fashioned way. DSL says, I would prefer standard rates, but since I'm not impulsive, I could see it being a benefit to me. I'll ride it out for a discount. However, for those unexpected circumstances, then we're screwed. I'm kind of there with you. There's very few things, DSL, that I have to buy immediately outside of the emergency. I'm actually very frugal when it comes to spending money. So there is an element of that I understand. But overwhelmingly, you and I both know this ain't going to be in the name of providing discounts to people. I feel like the lowest that it will ever be is what the costs are now. And it's going to be like, oh, wait, you mean to tell me we could get an extra 40% if we up the standard right now? Then that'd be fine. See someone asking on the TikTok line, we're in Walmart. We're in Wisconsin. We're in Appleton, Wisconsin doing the show. I probably should start the show off saying that kind of stuff now that there's a newer audience. But this is what I want to get on people's radar as we start the show off here. Plenty more to jump into over the course of the next 2 hours. And as I can see in the YouTube chat, this is obviously what people want to be talking about. So we will jump into this here. We're going to talk about the Strait of Hormuz. We have one more call coming in, so we'll get that in here. But you know what? I'll do what's coming up on the other side of the break after the call. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hey, Ben, it's Anna.
Hey, what's up, Anna?
I just wanted to mention, kind of in line with the theme this morning, is that Uber has been accused of manipulating rates based on your battery. And if you have low battery, they will raise the rates. So Vice reported on this, allegedly, of course, but...
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And then that's on top of the surge pricing in general, which we all just kind of universally accepted. And if listener Ben is listening, he can attest to this. As someone who used to drive for Uber, there would be extra rates for picking people up from a Penguins game or after a concert or something like that to kind of encourage drivers to go there. So, on top of already inflating the rates, if there is an event or extra traffic, you now get your own personal added rates based on your maturity level and capacity to keep a phone charged. It sounds like devastating news for people
Well,
like me.
absolutely. And not only is it predatory in pricing, it is predatory. It could be create dangerous situations for people, right? So,
Oh,
you know,
sure.
as a woman leaving the bar scene and your phone battery is low, and now all of a sudden, you know, you're trying to negotiate new rates, or, you know, if your phone is about to die and you're in a not great place. I mean, it's setting people up for really bad situations, even outside of the charges.
I couldn't agree with you more. And it sounds like it's ripe for disaster. And all it takes is one of those moments, Anna, and all of a sudden it becomes a national tragedy when instead it could be avoided if you just had the people in power stopping this kind of stuff. But I appreciate the attitude and the idea. Thanks for calling in. All right. That does it for that conversation there. And she's spot on with that as well. I should have made the jump to the ride share apps. That's such an obvious one. We got people listening all the way out in Hawaii right now. This is a wild time to be doing outside the box. When we come back, we're jumping into the Strait of Hormuz. I expressed skepticism on Friday. I said I'm going to be optimistic. Tomorrow at 8 p.m. is the end of the deadline for the 2-week ceasefire between Iran and America. I still maintain that in true Trump fashion, sometime between now and 8 p.m. tomorrow, there will be an announcement of a 2-week extension of the ceasefire between Iran and America with no real effort going forward. And of course, stock market manipulation along the way. If you haven't seen about what took place on Friday and where we are in regards to the Strait of Hormuz, America, Iran, and the entire relationship with the people in the Middle East in general, well, then stay right where you are, and we'll be back in just a little bit. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY. You know what's better than Googling a plumber and hoping for the best? Checking the reviews and seeing your neighbors already trust and love them. Roush Plumbing has the Google reviews to back it up. The Fox Valley homeowners are raving about these fast, friendly, and reliable services. And here's something you don't see every day: a free text line to a real plumber. Got a question before you schedule? Text it. Sometimes that's all you need. And with spring rains coming, don't wait to make sure your sump pump is ready. Call or text Roush Plumbing, the plumbing and remodeling company the Fox Valley depends on. You can find that free text line and more info at timroushplumbing.com. Jim on the YouTube channel says dynamic pricing. Pick up an item at the back of the store for $5.75. Walk to the cashier. It now scans for $6.50. Dynamic pricing, which, yeah, exactly. That sums it up perfectly there. And shout out to Native Gamer, who started off on TikTok and moved his way over to the YouTube chat to give that a whack. But as he highlighted, we haven't figured out how to get these guys to be able to hear me during the commercial breaks on YouTube yet. We're working on it here. Got a bunch of texts during the break here surrounding both dynamic pricing as well as the future topic as well. David just very simply says taco surrounding Donald Trump inevitably switching gears. And in my opinion, I do not think, maybe it's just me putting my own wishful thinking on the matter, but I do not believe that the violence will pick back up to the levels that it was prior to 2 weeks ago. I think he's going to ultimately end up pushing this for another 2 weeks. It's a running gag I have here at the station. I'm taking bets on which will come first, an actual peace deal with Iran or a workable healthcare plan, because just like with the peace deal in Iran, since the first Trump term, it's we're only 2 weeks away from better healthcare. We're only 2 weeks away from better healthcare. It's kind of a line that he has. It's always just about to come. It reminds me of the South Park episode where they do Game of Thrones and George R.R. Martin keeps saying, just be patient. Just be patient. The dragons are coming. The dragons will be here any moment now. And then the dragons never come throughout the entire episode. It feels like a similar prospect there. It could be. I hope I'm right, honestly, because I don't think we're anywhere near a peace deal, but I also don't want the violence to ensue. So if you ask me what would I want to see happen, it's probably that extension, because I don't believe we're going to get it. Hell, this is a strange thing to say out loud, but like Iran's propaganda is all over social media, and you can tell by the way that people are interacting with it that, like, I swear to God, it's 50-50. Have you guys seen these Lego music videos that they're posting out there? Again, I'm not siding with Iran. I'm saying they're using AI to create rap music videos mocking Donald Trump, and some of them are earworms, all right? There's no way around that. I'm telling you right now, we are nowhere near peace in this, no matter what the Trump administration is telling you. And what's funny is you see some of the components, and we'll wait until we get a finalized peace deal for me to speculate on this stuff, but it seems so much like the GCPOA on steroids is what Donald Trump is pushing for right now, and his supporters will clap for it. And whatever, as long as the violence stops, I don't care how we get there. But the principle still holds true. Ken simply says, I think it's a safe bet. DSL says, going back to price hikes, isn't Jersey doing the same thing for the World Cup? They're raising rates to the stadium to $150 from $12, blaming it on FIFA and want them to pay the cost, but I've not heard why the costs are $45 million higher. Are they running more trains or something? It sounds like price gouging to me. I wouldn't be surprised at all. I have heard some stories about that, and realistically, some of the most egregious perpetrators of this are, up until recently, Ticketmaster and Live Nation. Tickets to concerts and sporting events are some of the most egregious examples of it. I mean, realistically, I did not pay for my ticket to the Super Bowl. I got it from a friend for free because his aunt worked at ESPN. I went to the Super Bowl in February of 2011. I was 4 or 5 rows from the front of the entire thing. I was very close to the field. I was in the closer to the Steelers end zone side. And on my ticket, it had the value of the ticket printed on there, and it was $1,200 to sit 5 rows from the front at Super Bowl 45. I don't know what it costs today, but I'm willing to bet it's a whole hell of a lot more than $25. And I even remember then. Now, keep in mind, I was 6 months removed from graduating from college at this point, so I was a little college broke ass, or post-college broke ass. But I remember going in an all-ice bar and drinking a margarita in a glass made of ice, wearing a giant mink coat, and the one-shot drink cost me like $24 or something like that, and I was not thrilled. And something tells me at those kind of events today, if you can get a $24 ice drink like that, you're absolutely in the cheap seats, because that is not what it costs, I think, for a lot of people there. But I haven't been since 2011. So if anyone's been to a Super Bowl more recently than that, 920-281-1150, let me know what kind of costs you were incurring, because something tells me that's probably the way it worked. KG says Trump needs to mix it up a bit. It's always 2 weeks. How about 10 days, 1 week for a bit of variety? Well, he might do a shorter one this time because people are getting fed up with high prices, and it's only a matter of time before people get fed up with constantly stringing us along. So we'll have to see. Brian out in Fremont, although he's been traveling the country while he's listening lately, says, give me one party whose platform leads to abolishing Citizens United. I think a lot of people would get on board with that one there personally. And Justin says, thanks to Anna for the insight on Uber price hikes on your phone battery is low. Some great points there. I choose Uber to go embarrass myself for karaoke so I don't embarrass myself with a DUI. Exactly. I'm right there with you. And it's nonsense that it works that way. And again, at least the price surging during concerts, yes, it goes to enrich Uber, but yes, it also gives the driver a little bit more money as well. And I'm all in favor of getting the money to the drivers, because I can tell you from having worked for several rideshare apps for the better part of 3 years during a pandemic, if you do not have supplemental income, it is not a way to build a life. That is for sure. But so on to what some people in my text line here are talking about. On Friday's show, Donald Trump had announced that the Strait of Hormuz was going to be reopened, that the framework of a plan had been laid out, and that we were moving forward. Friday afternoon, there were radar shots of the Strait of Hormuz, and you were seeing ships turn around once they got there, and things were not trending in the direction that the United States government was implying that they were trending, and all culminating in, by the end of the weekend, it being announced that the Strait was closed back down for business. Over the course of 3 days, we saw the price of gas plummet and then shoot back up as a result of the conversations coming from the president. This is not the first time that I am telling you guys this, but it is the first time in this particular instance that it is happening. But this is not the first time that we have heard a story like this. $760 million worth of oil shorts were placed on the market 20 minutes before the announcement that a peace deal had been reached on Friday. Somebody with clearly insider knowledge became infinitely more wealthy as a result of that declaration that the Strait of Hormuz would be open and that we were close to peace. It is hitting a point here, guys, and you can probably pick up on it a little bit from the type of topics that I've been picking for the last week and a half. It is almost impossible to cover this in any kind of meaningful way anymore, because you cannot trust what the president of the United States is saying, and you cannot trust what's coming out of the Iranian government. It's getting to the point now where you can tell they are clearly preying on the fact that people cannot stand who Donald Trump is, or the way he talks, or what he is doing in this country. And so they position him in their statements about the war. And you can tell they are specifically speaking to liberals that are disgusted with the way that Donald Trump does things. I am not saying that they are wrong for being that way, but I'm saying it's very easy manipulatable. You know the word I'm trying to say there. You're easily manipulated when you kind of make it clear. Just like how we're going to be getting into a conversation later that there are a bunch of fake AI agents, actual people, not people typing on Twitter, face, mouth, words, all saying very positive things about Donald Trump. They dress up as armed service members, as well as random people that are just posting on their TikTok accounts, espousing Donald Trump talking points, and the right-wingers are falling for it, much like a lot of liberals are willing to go along for the ride on what Iran is saying. I'm not even saying what they're saying is wrong. I don't know. There's no way to know. And that's kind of a strange thing to say out loud for somebody that has to discuss politics for a living. You cannot trust what this guy says, because he can tell. Really think about it. I was thinking about it this morning. I'm not saying they're gone, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but the masked Virgin Army known as ICE has kind of disappeared from the limelight, has it not? It's because it was so uniquely unpopular in a midterm year that they had to shelve the over the top authoritarian Gestapo tactics that they were engaging in because even independents thought it was absolutely obscene and they have to win elections. And it's the same idea with the war in Iran. They thought there would be more people on board with this. We are not falling for, as Native Gamer says in the TikTok chat, millennials are used to being broke asses at this point. We are not falling for a weapons of mass destruction conversation a second time. We're not going along for it, and there's a hell of a lot of independents that are thinking the same way as well. Until there is a valid reason for this conflict, this Iranian war will be polling in the toilet. And as a result, Trump is a lot of things. He's not politically stupid. He needs to keep people convinced that this is almost over because you cannot run as a Republican with this hanging over you. Pay attention to the commercials that you're already seeing from the Tom Tiffany campaign, since there's really not much of a primary going on the GOP in Wisconsin. And you tell me how much it talks about bragging about accomplishments working with Donald Trump. And you won't find any because nobody's on board with the tariffs. Nobody's on board with the war. Nobody's on board with ICE behaving the way that they've been behaving, even if you do believe that immigration has completely gotten out of hand. There is not a coincidence that it works out this way. It's not unusual. One person says when it's time to vote, gas prices will be down and everything else will be down. He's very smart. I think that is the game plan, is to hope that people forget about this kind of stuff. He can say, hey, you remember that fire I started? Well, I also remembered where the fire extinguisher was, and I went and extinguished the fire that I started. And there will be a population of people willing to go along for that ride. I won't be one of them, but there will be a population of people willing to go along for that ride. And I think that's worth highlighting as well. And I'll even take you further. I think there will be a tariff stimmy check coming our way in like October with Donald Trump's name on it. I think he will send that in order to buy some votes because people are that fed up with it. We got a couple of different people coming in here. Basically, couldn't Trump just use AI to figure out how to be a better president? Well, I got that from Adam in Appleton. And you know what's funny and also incredibly sad at the same time? And this isn't the first time I've said this before. All of the politicians in power know what to do to fix the problems in society. They actively are choosing not to do it. AI would tell him the stuff that makes sense to do. Nipping surveillance pricing in the bud would be a positive thing to do in a country that really doesn't have much in the way of competition or free enterprise anymore. That would probably go a long way to winning over a lot of votes. Eliminating Citizens United would win over a lot of votes. Penalizing major corporations for hiring undocumented immigrants to stem the flow of immigrants into this country would probably be a popular thing to do. Taxing billionaires would be a popular thing to do. The reason they don't do it isn't because they don't know that it would be the popular thing to do. They don't do it because they're bought and paid for, and they have different ways of reflecting it. As I've told you guys 1,000 times over, with Kamala Harris in office, we're still bombing Iran. It's still roughly 30% popular, only it's a different 30% of people that are on board with it. And Democrats would be telling you that we're bombing Iran in the name of defending democracy and liberating women instead of talking about nuclear proliferation. That's the only thing that would change, because these guys know what we want. They know what we want to see happen, and they actively choose not to do it. I know you're joking, Adam, but I'm going to take it seriously here. Says, hey, Ben, JD here in New London, I'm assuming. How much money was made last Friday on the Straight is Open lie that sent the markets up, always just before markets close for the weekend. Good Friday also. Sickening. We're shocked every day when anything new comes out of his mouth. I'm right there with you, man. And like I said, $760 million in oil shorts placed just before the announcement that the Strait was open. Even if this were the only time that it happened, I'd be like, yeah, it could be a coincidence, but I am suspicious. Thing is, this isn't the first time we're having this conversation. It seems like it happens every time something like this happens, and I think it's worth highlighting. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hey, Ben, Cynthia in Florida.
What's up?
As I told you, I think was Friday, you know, Israel never stopped attacking Lebanon. That's a violation of the agreement that they came to. But listening to this financial fraud, if you lived in China and you did this, you would be executed. And the only way you weren't executed is if you were in prison for a year and good behavior, then you got life. I like China's policy. This is so obscene that they're doing this and getting away with it and enriching themselves like this, and especially Poly Market a couple weeks ago when there was this rescue of the soldiers. We don't even know how that played out, but that is partly owned by Donald Trump Jr. And people were betting on whether these soldiers would live or die. People need to be in prison for this.
I couldn't agree. I couldn't
Truly.
agree with you more, Cynthia. I think you're spot on, and I appreciate the call. It feels dystopian. It feels like an episode of Black Mirror where you'd be sitting there saying that would never happen that way. That is not how this is supposed to work. And sure enough, that's where we're living. Both Trump kids, by the way, have enriched themselves. I think one of them was worth 40 million before this presidency, and the other one was worth 50 million. They're both worth upwards of 300 million in the last year and a half, based on the investments that they're making and based on the diplomacy that they're trading in favor for bribes. But Hunter Biden wasn't involved, so it's not actually fraud. I got to sneak one more break in here. We'll have a short segment on the other side of the break. And before we get to the top of the hour news, and we'll put a bow on this first hour here before changing topics, I welcome your input as well. I'm going to check the YouTube line when we get there, 920-281-1150, 920-281-1150. We'll be back in just a little bit. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY. Shout out to Jerry, who said, I object to the notion that if you think this administration is trash, that makes you a liberal. Now, I'm not saying that makes you a liberal. I'm saying the Iranian government has clearly caught on to how to talk about Trump in a way that will kind of get people to innately believe what they are saying. I guess what I am trying to highlight here, Jerry, is that if you believe everything that the Iranian government is saying about the American government in regards to this war, I don't have the words to change your mind. All I'm asking is that you, and I think you would, Jerry, I mean the royal you, maintain that same kind of posture when it comes to when a liberal is in power. Because keep in mind, when different agencies within Palestine were remarking on casualty numbers. Well, those are Hamas funded and we can't trust those. Why would Joe Biden and his administration be lying to us about what's going on here? Trust the American government. We don't trust the terrorists. But now that Donald Trump is in office, all of a sudden the Iranian government has a little credence to what they're saying. I'm not saying that's not accurate. I am just saying that you have to maintain that posture. And these guys are catching on onto how to talk to American audiences using the buzzwords that we are all looking for to get us on board with it. When Iran says Donald Trump is negotiating like a madman and we don't even know if he knows what he's going to do the next day. The Iranian leaders sounds like they could have been a host on MSNBC. They are speaking to a specific type of person there. And the same people who were saying you can't trust the numbers coming from the health ministry in Gaza. You can't trust the on the ground reporting coming from people that have cell phones that are getting their info out from that conflict, are all of a sudden now very keen to believing what the Iranian government is saying. I am somebody who does not trust the American government, but also knows that there are countries that would intend to do us harm, and finding that happy medium of the information that you can trust mixed with knowing that everybody is putting their own spin on this info is an important way to go into it. So if I said it in a way, I guess I say all of that to say, as people often tell me is one of my catchphrases, I say all that to say, if it sounded like I was implying that you had to have Trump derangement syndrome or whatever MAGA calls it in order to believe what Iran's saying, that's not what I meant. I'm just saying that I watched liberals tell you that you cannot trust what is coming out of the quote fingers enemy government, only to now turn around and be like, see, these guys get what Trump is all about. And I just think it's worth highlighting the hypocrisy in that attitude. Brian says the third time in 3 weeks, large shorts to the oil market within 30 minutes of a ceasefire, 3 weeks in a row on a Friday. Also, my bet on boots in the ground in Iran is at 2 a.m. tomorrow morning, their time. Well, we'll see what happens. I'm a firm believer that isn't going to happen. I think violence will be avoided, but I also am pretty Pollyannish. And as Jaramani says in the YouTube line, it's finally getting picked up in the mainstream surrounding the obvious stock manipulation and efforts to kind of enrich yourself based on wartime activities that haven't been unnoticed here and are becoming pretty flagrant. Like I said, it's absolutely impacting how I talk about it with you guys, which should sum everything up right there. We have to squeeze another break in here, guys. It's the longest break of the show. When we come back, we're going to talk about AI's impact on politics and, in my opinion, more importantly, the future of politics. The failing New York Times put out a story that caught my eye that is absolutely worth jumping into. And if you haven't seen it, it ties into a conversation that we had on this show, if not last week, then 2 weeks ago, about how you can't trust even people in their car anymore talking about the state of living. All that and more coming out. Check us out on YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok. And of course, download the WHBY app to take the show with you on the road. We'll be back on the other side of the news. All right, and we're back outside the box. Ben Commonos, WHBY, and Political Voices Network. Outside the Box is brought to you by Roush Plumbing and Remodeling, the plumbing and remodeling company the Hawks Valley depends on. If you are just joining us, we were talking about surveillance pricing, Walmart, JetBlue, and a handful of other companies, rideshare apps kind of getting caught with their hand in the cookie jar. And this really does seem like the future of economics if we do not get a handle on it now. Not a matter of improving the quality of goods that you receive, not a matter of improving the services you receive, just finding ways to fleece you for more of your hard-earned cash that you have already earned. Funny how that works. But without any type of interest in trying to crack down on that from our politicians, we just have to be aware that it's a possibility here. And then, of course, we went into the news of the month surrounding a war of choice started by the president that really has not benefited us in any kind of meaningful way, and just the people who seem to be able to enrich themselves. My YouTube chat, it's almost impossible to keep up with at this point, but these guys are having a really good conversation over there just about the flagrant types of fraud and abuse taking place in this administration. It takes place all the time, but it's just the egregious and in your face nature that I think needs to be highlighted. But I digress. And with that in mind, I do want to pivot here, but kind of stay in the same realm. We have a guy in my TikTok chat who basically just sounds like he is a spokesperson for Donald Trump, and that's fine. People new to the show really don't know what they're getting into here, and I can't stress enough. This is the first time you're hearing me, you got to go back to my shows from 2023 and 2024. I'm not a Democratic supporter. I just know what's happening now is objectively worse than what was taking place during the Biden administration. Don't know if it's better or worse than Harris, but if you ask me, gun to my or shouldn't say that. I'm gonna get restricted on TikTok. If you ask me to choose, I would assume I don't think anything could be trending in a worse direction here, but time will tell, of course. We'll have a conversation about how you can get repaid for tariff costs. Not you, of course, businesses, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Okay, so with that, I do want to touch on this, though, because I think this is going to be a problem. I highlighted about 2 or so weeks, maybe even a little longer, closer to 3 weeks. When this show started, I used to find videos of like mothers in their late 40s, early 50s, maybe even early 60s with children who were college graduate age or didn't go to college but were in their early 20s, and talking about the strife that they were running into trying to start a life, trying to get their lives off the ground, despite the fact, oh, my kid went to college to do this. My kid apprenticed at a job to do this. And yet they still can't move out of my house. And I'm not shaming them for this. I'm asking what's wrong with it. And there was a time when it felt very organic and just people very frustrated with it. I used to have that audio on this show all the time. And I noticed that these started feeling forced, that people were reacting extra over the top in order to get the clicks, the shares, the likes, because there was almost like an entire community of people looking for other people talking about that, and they were just looking to monetize a game. And so once it felt more like actors than it did real people, I stopped sharing them because I was like, well, I kind of see through what they're trying to do here. And even though I agree with the sentiment, I can tell when someone's really living it and when somebody's trying to placate me. There's somebody in my life who told me, Ben, you think I don't understand what millennials are going through just because I'm a little bit older than you. I remember being in my 20s and I had to cancel my vacation to Cancun because I just wasn't making enough money to go on a vacation that year. And I was like, okay, you obviously have no grasp on what I'm actually talking about when I do my show. And I feel like that is becoming more pervasive. Then there is the element of the dry sarcasm that goes on social media. And I'll be real. I speak fluent, dry sarcasm. I do it all the time on this show. Those of you that have been listening to me do this program for the last 3.5 years, you know when I'm being sarcastic. when I say, oh, well, at least there'll be less Mexicans, so I guess this country's getting better. I'm ironically describing Donald Trump's presidency over the course of the last 15 months. You know, I actually don't believe that, and I do not have to put a disclaimer or an LOL or a JK next to it. Listen to this video, and you tell me. I know the answer already, but you tell me if this sounds like somebody is being sarcastic or if it's what they really mean. You tell me what you get out of this.
If Jesus was alive today, he would say, "That sucks that you're poor. You should work harder. Your kids don't deserve to eat."
Now, I think it's fairly obvious that that person was operating in jest, but there was an entire movement of people saying I had to actually scroll this person's account to see if they actually meant that, because there's so many people out there that are contorting their understanding of politics or religion or economics, depending on who is in office at that time. I don't think that's as big of an issue either, but this is the one. This is the one that I think might sink this democracy. In 2016, the memes that people were falling for in regards to Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump, I don't think a 14-year-old would have fallen for. I think the only people falling for what they saw were people that were looking for a reason to abstain. And trust me, as an ardent Hillary Clinton hater, you didn't need to search hard to find a reason. But or B, it was people of an older generation that aren't as used to navigating social media, or at least in 2016 were not as used to it. I would argue there's a bit more prevalence now. I think people are not great at it. I think fake news still absolutely permeates every single social media application that's out there, but people are getting better at it at the very least, which means it's time to up the game in regards to the fake information that is out there. Now, I am not accusing the Trump administration of doing this. It could quite literally be coming from anywhere. But what is happening now is that AI agents are being created. TikTok right now is saying, Ben, would you like to create an AI version of yourself that will post while you're not? And I'm like, absolutely the F not. Thank you very much for asking. What kind of evil machinations are going on behind the scenes on this app? There are hundreds, if not thousands, of accounts going up right now that are not real people. The failing New York Times has a video compilation of them up, and I tried playing it, but it doesn't play well for radio, so I'm not going to play it for you guys. But they all have the same script, and they are all saying the same thing. I have the closed captioning up in front of me here, and it says, "The left say Republicans aren't unified." That's funny because I bet I can get a Trump supporter from every state to comment. And there are hundreds of these accounts doing this kind of stuff. Liberals will be following suit. I am not telling you that this is a uniquely Republican thing. I am telling you that this is the future of discourse surrounding politics. And it is going to be on us to know the difference. And I'm here to tell you right now, we are not that far removed from a reality where you're not going to be able to get your media on social media anymore. And that's a shame, because when I started this show back in 2022, just before the Nazi salute and jag took over the website, this was one of the best sources for union victories across America. It was one of the best sources for news going on around the country that was relatable to what we were going through here in Northeast Wisconsin. And as recently as this weekend, you can no longer really, even as someone who almost exclusively interacts with political posts and videos of cats, you cannot I cannot get, I'd say I'm at the point where 1 in every 10 posts that I see actually has something to do with politics. And then on top of that, the politics are normally nonsensical. It's some blue MAGA telling me that if a progressive wins in Michigan or Francesca Hong wins in Wisconsin in the primary, that's the only Democrat that they won't vote for. Or it's a MAGA talking about how brilliant the war in Iran is. And that's like the only political news that you can get anymore. I am paid to suss this out and find the real information. It is not difficult for me to take the time to go and do these kind of things. If it's not your job to do that, if it's something that you do, you scroll for 10 minutes to try and see what the general discourse is, you are living in a very different world than what is actually happening in the eyes of a lot of people here. And as that becomes more of the norm, that's going to almost homogenize what's going on in the world of political discourse. So you have all these accounts. I saw another one that I don't have in front of me, and it's all super sexy women in military fatigues saying, I don't care if this makes you mad. I'm a Trump supporter. And if you're a Trump supporter too, you should follow me. None of them are real. Not a single one of them is real. And much like how in the 9 o'clock hour, I said that the people in the Middle East, the regimes in the Middle East are understanding how to talk about Trump in a way that liberals and people that do not adhere to the Trump philosophy will listen to what they're saying and be like, oh, I actually believe Iran more than I believe America. That's what's happening in AI towards the MAGA brigade. Start a video with, I don't care if this makes you mad. Women are women. And all of a sudden, you've got yourself an entire organic following base because it's very easy to know what talking points get either side of the political aisle to rally. I say it all the time on this show. If I wanted to sell out and do a strictly MAGA or strictly blue MAGA show, I think my career would shoot through the roof. But I think you have to pick a side. And as long as you don't pick a side, then at least in terms of national established media outlets, they're not going to want to talk to you because all they want is someone to propagandize you into this Middle Eastern conflict is bad, but what was happening in Gaza was acceptable, or vice versa. And somebody's saying, oh no, I'm an actual anti-war leftist who thinks what Donald Trump is doing, whether it's from a foreign policy standpoint or a domestic economy standpoint, he seems to be leaving us out to dry. But that being said, it's not like the cost of living was particularly affordable during the Biden years. This is the way the political discourse should be taking place. And instead, it gets restricted. It gets removed from the discourse, and instead they'd rather put fake people up there that will keep the discourse staying on track and only between a few pre-approved conversations and not about what's actually happening. How many of you guys have seen, read, heard any of it about the protests going on in Ireland right now? They quite literally reduced the price of oil, of gas in Ireland because of the protests. No shade at no kings. But why is it exactly that what Ireland is doing is actually resulting in economic change? It's a protest that should be championed by everybody involved. American is all get out as far as I'm concerned. Why isn't it in the mainstream? Why isn't somebody actually covering this in a meaningful way, showing that when an entire country's people band together, they can push back against the $7 billion companies that are weighing us down and actually enact the kind of change that we all want to see? How is it possible that that isn't what's making it, but AI people talking about how awesome Donald Trump is or how bad Donald Trump is what's ultimately getting pushed into our feed? But you have to actively search out this information. These are the kind of conversations that we should be asking ourselves when we are watching the mainstream media and questioning how it is that this kind of information can make itself available. We got our first call of the hour here. Anybody else wants to chime in? 920-281-1150, 920-281-1150. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hey, morning, Ben. I just had to voice my displeasure in this administration. As you know, you've been talking about the greed. The one big one that's just happening right now is that they're going to start considering paying tariffs off to the corporations. So not only are the corporations who've already charged this extra for the tariffs going to get their money back, but then the Lucknick boys, the ones that have been selling options to companies on the rights of their tariff returns are going to make out like bandits. So all the way around, everybody's laughing except for us. So yeah, anybody who was hollering about Hunter Biden and all the other people who were ripping off the United States, come on, get on and tell me this is not blatant hypocrisy.
And even I'll even tie it into something else there, Brian, because you kind of are on point with where I wanted to go. Jay-Z, after COVID, got $2.4 million in PPP funds. Tom Brady, that ball deflating bastard, got $972,000 in PPP loans reimbursed. Meanwhile, mom and pop shops were closing left, right, and center post-COVID because there wasn't enough money to go around for them. It seems to me that this tariff reimbursement is operating very similarly to the PPP reimbursement, something that's good on paper, but that fundamentally gets funneled into the hands of a few, and we'll sit there complaining about Somalis or whatever the conversation is of the day.
Exactly. No, the hypocrisy is great. And I just want to add one more thing to all of our people back in Fremont and the surrounding area who are dealing with the floods. We'll be home soon to help clean up. Man, it's heartbreaking to see what's going on over there. And our prayers are out to the people that are busting their butt over there trying to save their houses and their businesses. So thank you.
Thank you for saying that. You're awesome for saying that, Brian. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your trip, and we'll talk soon. Yeah, and he's spot on with his assessment there, and it's not the first time that happens. It's a tale as old as time. It's the way that this stuff works, and I'm not even saying you got to let Hunter Biden slide. I'm saying come at all of this with the same energy, or don't bother coming at any of it, because there comes a time when the hypocrisy of it is so flagrant and so obvious that it's very hard to take seriously. And Jerry is say the failing New York Times, he didn't say failing, has covered the Ireland protest. I'm not saying it hasn't been covered, Jerry. I don't mean to say that literally. When I say that kind of stuff, I mean speculation about whether or not Kash Patel has been drinking on the job or not gets wall-to-wall coverage on TV. Conversations about the necessity to continue bombing Iran, even if you don't trust Donald Trump, is what's going on in the New York Times opinion section. It's not the fact that it's not covered. It's just like the East Palestine, Ohio train wreck. It got covered in mainstream media. It was a quick 15 to 30 second pop, and then you move on to whatever it is. And the only reason it got covered in any kind of meaningful way is because independent journalists and small market people were actually covering the story. So I don't mean to say that it's literally not being talked about, but in an era when an entire country put aside their differences and protested against a monopoly-driven economy, raising their gas prices for no reason other than, because as I stated on Friday, if no one was listening on Friday, $30 million an hour, an extra $30 million an hour is being made by some of the largest oil companies, and that's profit. That's not revenue. That's not because they're charging prices and so obviously they're making more money. $30 million in profit an hour extra as a result of the gas prices. And Ireland says, nah, we're not paying this. And they shut down the entire country, and then the cost of gas went down in Ireland. That should be a story that is not a quick one-hitter on a random day on the New York Times, and then nobody talks about it again. And even I myself am guilty of this, because I have known about this for over a week, but given how many different stories make my way, and I control like 4 different computer screens while I'm doing the show now, sometimes I forget everything that I want to talk about on a daily basis. This has been on my rundown, and this is the first time that I can bring it up. And instead, we shove AI deepfakes in front of people and hope that enough of our grandparents and the 15-year-olds who are watching are influenced in a way that they make up their mind about something that is quite literally made up. And I think that's worth highlighting. Speaking of economic inequality, we talked about a policy last week, 1% tax on homes over $5 million in New York. Conversations were had. You know who loves this? The people, the real estate agents in Florida. They're going to love all of these billionaires moving down there and starting to invest in their states and in their companies and letting people and helping the people of Florida benefit from these decisions. So I decided, let's go ahead and see what's going on in Florida. Let's go ahead and see exactly how they are doing with their no taxes and their Republican safe haven for people that don't want to contribute into a system that actually absolutely benefited them while they were growing up. Let's look and see what New York, hypothetically, there's no proof that that's actually happening, but let's wait and see what New York is actually doing, and we'll go from there. I have to go to break. We'll do that on the other side of that. You're listening to Outside the Box here on WHBY. Well, hello. We're back. Um all right. So on to this conversation about affordability here. And this is a bit of an existential dilemma, right? Because if you're a regular on this show, you know I'm an FDR style progressive, strongest middle class, taxing billionaires, strong antitrust, strong union participation, yada, yada, yada. We undid that in the mid 80s. And since then, we have watched the slow constriction of the middle class as a result of austerity politics. Slowly strangling everyday working Americans. And the saddest part about all that is if you ask those working Americans, about 30 to 40% of them will tell you actually austerity politics are the way to go. And the real reason we're struggling is Mexicans, or whatever the dumb idea of the day is. On a state level, we can kind of watch this strategy play out, because when I bring up the idea that we have to go back to the era of FDR style tax raises, actually holding the wealthiest to account because they are not investing in R&D, they are not making our lives more affordable, they are not giving our jobs, giving us more jobs, they're actually eliminating jobs. They are not paying us more at those jobs. Once you account for inflation, we basically stagnated for the last 15 years. For the record, the last person to sign a minimum wage increase was George W. Bush. There have been 2 Democratic presidents that each had a majority at one point and haven't been able to get a second minimum wage increase across since 2009. Just food for thought there. Nothing to do with anything, but just some food for thought there as well. None of this stuff gets invested in when we cut people's taxes, and yet somehow the Republican Party can always find a way to sell tax cuts for the rich. They can always find a way to push those unpopular tax cuts through to the finish line, while Democrats sit there with their hands up and say, we can't run on taxing people more. They'll label us as extremists. Now, excuse us as we try and push back against a mass Virgin Army shooting Americans in the street. I say all this to say, there's a lot of pre-baked in talking points that I think are garbage. And it's always nice to come across real empirical data that shows you that those talking points are in fact garbage once you see them enacted in policy. Case in point, you see people talk about the mass exodus from liberal bastions like New York and California. Oh, well, you see, if you're something trans, people are going to leave your state. You see how high these taxes are? These wealthy people that are always looking for fun stuff to do and love living in some cultural epicenters of the country, well, they're just not going to put up with that, and they're going to end up going somewhere else. Allow me to present you with a different set of information, shall I? In New York, they announced, as I said before the break, the extra tax, 1% on $5 million second homes that you're not living in New York. This should be such an open and shut slam dunk case that it shouldn't even really be media. But of course, because the wealthiest among us are so selfish, so greedy, so spoiled, they have to push back against any kind of effort to rein in their wealth comparable to what happened before 1983. Because if you give these vermin, otherwise known as the working class, an inch, they take a mile. So we have to make them fight for every scrap of progress forward as we just drag them kicking and screaming backwards for the last 45 years. So when this tax was announced, you see, in all likelihood, probably some of these AI agents that we just did a segment about start to rally the troops and start to say, man, I wish I were a real estate agent in Florida right now, because once these billionaires realize they have to pay an extra 1% on their second bleeping homes in New York, they're going to start investing in Florida, and everybody in Florida is going to benefit, and everybody's going to move to Florida, and New York's going to circle the drain because they don't know how money works. I wonder how the middle class is actually faring as a result of some extra particularly tax evasive Americans that have been interested in moving to Florida. I wonder how those benefits are trickling down onto the people of Florida. If only there were a capacity for me to be able to look this information up and have this info ready for you guys. Oh, well, would you look at that? I already came prepared with it. No, they are currently proposing austerity budgets that cut funds to education, healthcare, public transportation, public lands, and so many more different public popular operations, they actually have to cut funds from these, despite the fact that they have billions of dollars funneling in from people that are looking to avoid paying their taxes in blue states. And moreover, people from the middle class are now moving away because they are being priced out of living in Florida. It's almost like Florida is becoming a state for the exceptionally wealthy and literally nobody else, which is also not very good. Seems very reminiscent of what it's like trying to live a life in LA making $30 an hour, i.e., not very possible to do. I went to a wedding in Key West about, if it wasn't a year ago, it was 2 years ago around this time. And I got an Uber drive and I asked him, I said, "Where do you live in Key West that driving Uber is a beneficial way to make a living?" And he said, "I don't. I have to make a drive from almost 40 minutes away from the middle of the state to come here for the slightly increased traffic that doesn't come to him from living where he lives." But so they have fast food restaurants and chain restaurants and rideshare drivers and all of these different jobs that people use, people go to. They go and get their coffee, they go and get a cheap meal. But the people working there providing these services that people obviously need do not make enough to live in the same area. And you can now count Florida among them. Zohran Mamdani shows up and says, if you work in New York, you should be able to afford to live in New York. It shouldn't be that bold of a statement. He says, I'm going to tax billionaires an extra couple percent. And blue MAGA liberals like Kathy Hochul get in his way. I want to tax these people and make it more accessible for the average American to live here while barely even putting a dent in the amount of money necessary for these people, these billionaires, to run their businesses. It shouldn't be a hard thing to push for, especially as liberals, because conservatives, as I often highlight in Congress, get to play the maybe you didn't work hard enough card, and their supporters fall in line with that. But for the rest of us that know that's not the case and it's as a result of a corrupt system, this is the kind of conversation that gets people talking in a meaningful way about this kind of stuff. And this is what we need to highlight. So when Florida says, oh, come here, if Zohran Mamdani is scaring you with his taxes, come here, the immediate talking point should be, look at what it's like to be middle class working there. As I've highlighted, Western PA gentrified. The spot, I was technically part of it because I didn't know what gentrification was, because when I made enough to afford my duplex, I was not particularly politically involved or knowledgeable or anything like that. So when the opportunity comes, a cost of living rise comes with them, and people that have lived in a community for decades find themselves leaving because they no longer can afford to live somewhere. This is the line that you hear. Billionaires will take their money elsewhere. And A, it very rarely is borne out to be true. And B, when it is borne out to be true, you rarely see the lives of people increase when the money is being taken somewhere else. We need to start having these kind of conversations in a real way if we're going to evolve. We can't keep getting stuck in the same cycles of dialogue that just are not borne out in reality. They might make sense in your head, but that's unfortunately not where reality is. And we have to talk about the reality of the situation. And the reality of the situation is this. In Southern Florida, a teacher makes $35,000 a year. After taxes and insurance and all the other things that come out of their paycheck, they take home a little over $2,300 a month for the work that they are doing. The average rent in Southern Florida is $1,700 a month. So we are telling a teacher now that they no longer can afford the average rent in their area, and they either need to pick a second job or consider not being a teacher anymore. This is not the way that life worked for most of American society. And the fact that it is trending this way now is not an accident, but it is in fact by design. And if we do not step up to this, we will be one of the last places where this happens, as will Pittsburgh, because we do not have the bustling metropolitan areas of New York. We do not have the beautiful beaches of California and Florida and a handful of other states that encourage people to come to these places. But it's going to impact all of us. America was at its strongest between 1945 and 1973 when taxes were high, when unions were strong, when antitrust was enforced, when stock buybacks were illegal. And pretending anything to the contrary, as one of the dumbest comments I see is in my TikTok chat right now, taxes are simply theft. Tell that to the boomers and silent generation that had homes literally built for them and then given to them that are now worth $1.6 million. This is what tax dollars can do for you. The reason people like Archie think taxes are theft is because in America, our tax dollars go to blowing up Iranian children in school instead of health care. And we have a Democratic Party who, when the Democrats are in control, will say, vote blue no matter who, when you are mad about an ongoing genocide in Gaza. But when a progressive Democrat shows up and says, I want to do Medicare for all, Blue MAGA shows up and says, I might just not vote this year. Because that is what we are voting between. A Republican Party who exclusively wants to cut taxes for everything other than blowing up school children, and a Democratic Party who wants to increase taxes and then use that money to blow up school children. And we're trying to find a political party that actually means business. And unfortunately, I just don't know if they are out there right now. Jerry says, since 1990, the population of NYC is up about 1 million people. Whenever I go back, I see new construction throughout the city. It's no coincidence. And by the way, I maintain if we pulled this kind of thing nationwide and people are like, billionaires are just going to leave, and a handful of them actually tried, I'm saying we should repurpose ICE and say, you want to leave America after you fleeced us for billions of dollars? You have a 95% exit tax. And you can go, since billionaires are such hardworking, industrious Americans, I'm sure they can recreate that practice somewhere else since they're so stick-to-it and have such fortitude. I'm sure they'd be able to create their success again. And we just hit them on their way out the country because I kind of have had enough of being bullied by these people that clearly don't want to contribute to the system, and our politicians will somehow pretend like we need them for some reason that I haven't particularly been able to understand in the 3.5 years that I've been doing a show. DSL says, how long do we have to wait before we see the results for NYC's socialist experiment? Even when the government has a good idea, they always have bad execution. Since NYC already has high cost of living, putting the city on an equal income will just price out the rest of the country. Tourism might collapse, which is a big part of the economy. Well, it's a fair assessment that it's going to take time to see a lot of these plans come to fruition. And more importantly, they will be watered down because, to your point, DSL, Obamacare was supposed to have a public option, as I talked about pretty extensively on Friday, and as I've talked about a dozen times on this show. There was supposed to be a government-run option providing generics to operate as competition to private entities who are currently gouging us for both generics as well as the name brand drugs. Do you know who voted against it, though, DSL? Every single Republican in the House and Senate voted against it. So now when you see people talking about Obamacare, they talk about endless subsidy going into the government and the fact that we still owe astronomical costs when the actual progressive thing to do was do the Single Payer Act. You're watching Kathy Hochul right now block any type of movement. And to me, DSL, what you're describing is my worst case scenario in 2028, is the Democrats push Gavin Newsom to the top of the ticket. Gavin Newsom wins because the Republican Party is a trash fire right now. And then people like yourself will say that Gavin Newsom is a far left extremist, despite the fact that he's a center right Republican. His policies will fail, and it will do damage to progressive politics, even though none of that makes any sense. It's like how people were calling her Communist Kamala, despite the fact that she was running alongside Liz Cheney on Reagan era tax cuts and a strong military and bombing Iran. Like, there comes a time when the reality of the situation needs to kick in, and this is no different. So I don't know how long it would take to see an actual progressive or quasi-socialist agenda actually take grip in a city or in a state, because both parties will work overtime to make sure that the American public does not see the benefit of a lot of this agenda. And it's going to make it hard. What I do know is Trump's tariffs ain't it, and Bidenomics wasn't it. So I do know we got to try something different. Why not try this? It can't possibly be worse than what is. Let's just, for the sake of argument, just once try taxing 970 Americans instead of, in the Democrats' world, increasing taxes on hundreds of millions of Americans, or in conservative worlds, just not paying taxes and watching society collapse in on itself and blaming Mexicans. What if we just try once taxing billionaires like we did during the time period of the strongest growth of the middle class? Call me crazy, but I think it might just work. We got to go to break, and we'll be back on the other side for one more quick segment before we wrap up the show. We'll tie us all together. And we'll jump into that on the other side. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY. Got a guy trying to convince me the Gilded Age was actually the strongest period in American history because stupidity knows no bounds in politics. I'm flabbergasted at somebody even trying to spin that. Like, that either says you don't do research, you're stupid, or you're in my chat specifically trying to spread just disingenuine argument that isn't based in any kind of reality. And whichever one of those it is, you're too dumb to be taking part in the conversation. Andrew in Oshkosh says, I've been visiting Florida for over 30 years, and one thing I've noticed is that most homes have 6 to 8 cars in the driveway/yard because I am sure the family is trying to afford housing, which has been driven up year after year because of wealth. Sad that everyone can't see it. We both cannot see the forest through for the trees. And for the record, Andrew, there's also an element of the insurance costs shooting through the roof in order to be able to own a home in Florida, because there's a hurricane that knocks over the home every single year. So the capacity to pay for insurance absolutely weighs in on people's ability to afford there as well, which is worth highlighting there too. This kind of thing is playing out regularly right in front of us. Some of us are too clueless to see it happening, but for the rest of us that are actually paying attention, that are trying to learn, that are trying to grow through this, it's hard to watch happen. It's hard to watch happening. I mean, we're still dealing with the effects of last week's weather. 23 tornadoes over the course of a week just across Wisconsin. We are incredibly fortunate here in Northeast Wisconsin that none of them were in the immediate Fox Valley area, but we were absolutely surrounded by them. As Brian highlighted, there's people hoping to salvage what they can from their homes as a result of the weather that we got. If that all of a sudden became a once a year, twice a year occurrence for the average person, good luck affording the insurance of what it would cost to own here in Wisconsin. We're not immune to it. It's just that weather events like that have not made their way up here yet. And then on top of that, they do not tax their wealthy in a way to have a social safety net comparable to what the boomers and generations before them had access to. And it's incredibly frustrating to watch these things diminish, to watch it shrink under the guise of lies and hoping that enough people like Archie in my TikTok chat, like Nunya in my YouTube chat, will remain ignorant enough to preach talking points coming from a party that does not like you about a system that does not exist anymore. And until then, we're going to have to continue pushing back against that. And that's what this show is going to continue doing. I have to say, in terms of Monday shows, I came with a pretty high-end energy compared to what I normally do, because some of these stories were just so enraging that it's kind of difficult to ignore. And I have to say, if the quote-unquote adults in the room, who liberals would have you believe they are, but I would say to them, maybe stop coming forward as Tammy Baldwin has, pushing back against being able to stream sports. Definitely a relevant endeavor, definitely getting too expensive, not high up on the radar for a lot of people struggling to get by. Make the necessities affordable again. Do things about housing, homes, fraud going towards billionaires and not Somalis, and all the other conversations that we have. And I promise you'll be able to waltz to victory for the next 20 years. It's just a matter of, do you actually want to do that? With that, I have to call it a show here. We're streaming live, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, every day, 9 to 11 Central Time. If you haven't been taking part, please consider subscribing to any of those. I also have a full-blown YouTube channel at Ben Cominos. If you like this conversation, please do consider following along for the ride, because I do my best. I see some people in the TikTok chat get confused by some of my inside jokes that I have with the locals here. Just keep listening. It all makes much more sense than you think it does once you listen long enough. And of course, download the WHBY app. It's free and easy to use. Just search WHBY in Google Play or App Store. Bring the show along with you on the ride. And with that, I got to call it a show. Haley's up next, and we'll be back tomorrow with Outside the Box.